Thank you very much for your patience. It's good to be back here in Luxembourg. We rarely stop to think about the infrastructure as infrastructure. We move through it. Is this being recorded, please? Awesome. We build on it. We depend on it, just as the chipmunk depends on the forest. But when the forest itself begins to fail, no creature inside can see the collapse coming. This is the failure pattern we're here to warn you about today. The illusion of resilience built atop invisible shared dependencies. When time itself becomes that failing forest. You see, a Rube Goldberg machine is a good metaphor for our modern infrastructure. Lots of moving parts, not all engineered for today's load. And if we bought this particular Rube Goldberg machine at IKEA, somebody definitely threw out the assembly manual.
Yeah, it's probably using the screws as a crypto miner.
That's right. Our talk is about time integrity, the fundamental glue that holds this distributed system we call the internet together.
We're not talking about NTP patch levels here. We're talking about trust in time itself.
That's right. So before we dive in, a quick bit of history, just so we're all aligned. Time on the net was first improvised, and then it was standardized. Back in the early 80s, before ARPANET even switched to TCP/IP, NTP was running as one of the first applications. It uses a 32-bit unsigned counter starting in 1900. This yields 136 years, rolling over in 2036. Now, in the 1980s, this felt like infinity. Nobody imagined the same protocol still upholding the global internet 4 decades later. This was the life's work of David Mills. He passed in 2024, leaving us this gift. But even the most elegant protocols have finite horizons. See, on the 7th of February, 2036, NTP's 32-bit counter rolls over. Many NTP-dependent systems will be cast back to the Victorian era, thinking as 1900. Think about your TLS certs. Think about your logs. Think about your forensics. Instantly Victorian. This happens 2 years before the titular 2038 bug that you think you came here to see, which is the signed integer version of this story. You see, computers mostly reckon time by counting since the start of 1970. With the 32-bit standard signed time T-struct, that yields about 2.1 billion seconds, or about 68 years. At 3:14:07 UTC, 19 January 2038, this counter maxes out. The signed bit flips, and time jumps back to December of 1901. Anything touching C potentially inherits the time T-struct. This is operating systems, yes, but also databases, protocols, firmware. As you'll see, it's the sort of Damocles hanging over billions of devices. The kernel's patched, maybe, but userland and the tool chains, nor the install base, we haven't even begun. Now, this looks a little bit like CDW190. It's a classic integer overflow. You're not wrong, but you're also not right. You see, when the shared system clock across billions of systems can overflow simultaneously, and when this attack surface is exposed potentially today to a marginally motivated attacker, that's a vulnerability class. It's not just a bug. So let's name this class clearly. Y2K affected on the order of maybe 100 million systems. Today we're looking at on the order of tens of billions. Routers, industrial controllers, telecoms, medical power, stuff that we can't just easily turn off and back on while ticking toward the same rollover. And because authentication and coordination rely on shared time, a single epoch slip or attack could lock out millions of sysadmins or desync entire networks. I tried setting a 2038 reminder in my Proton calendar. Their team confirmed that they only support events between 1970 and December of 2037. You see, if even the best, most security-minded teams on planet Earth today, bear in mind Proton Calendar launched in 2022, they're bumping up against these hard-coded limits. Our legacy systems are screwed. There's almost no coordination or awareness today. See, bugs you patch, but vulnerability classes require coordination. How did we get here? Disco-era pragmatism. See, this started off as a hack in the 70s, just count seconds. On a PDP-11, a 32-bit sign long made sense. Back in the 80s, Marshall Kirk McCusack, who shared an office in Berkeley with Bill Joy, creator of such things as Java, runs everywhere, told how at the time their compilers didn't even have the option for 64-bit math. So there were compromises made. Along the way, around Bell Labs version 4, we moved to counting seconds on a 32-bit time T struck, this became the standard pattern. This gave us 68 years. Back then, 68 years seemed like forever. Nobody expected a research project to become planetary infrastructure. Now, what's interesting is if we had rolled out a 64-bit time T, that gives us on the order of 292 billion years, which might outlast the cosmos. Unfortunately, we were short of RAM, and this disco-era hack got baked into POSIX, pragmatism ossified, this design pattern proliferated throughout our technology stack, and here we are today. But you see, 2038 is just the pivot point. Here's a mental map. Rollovers aren't random. They cluster around the bit width boundaries, like your 8, 16, 32, 64 bits. Wherever a counter is going to roll out of room, this is where these type of bugs manifest. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now, 36 and 38 converge on us inside of a single decade. But they're just the opening shocks. If we don't fix the pattern now, we'll meet it again in 06 and in any other protocol that hides this kind of ticking bomb. Now try selling this complexity to your board. Y2K had a 10-second pitch. 1900, this is what 2000 is going to look like. Oh, I see it. But there's no elevator pitch. You need a crash course in integer math and Epoch rollovers, and 5 minutes in, your board's tuned out. They're looking at their phones. This is not a question of competence. It's a question of cognitive load. This is not an elevator pitch, guys. So, to the question of prior art, I spoke about this publicly at the O'Reilly Security Conference in 2016. I gave a kind of opening keynote thing there that day. I spent the last decade looking at this question. I went to the Belgian National CERT in the early days, spent years there, went to Accenture, got voted on the first board of directors, all the time looking for the working group that I was sure somewhere must be tracking this issue. But I didn't find them. What I found instead was silence and polite confusion and awkward laughter. So to everyone hearing me out on 2038 over the years, I say thanks. And to Pedro for listening to me last year at HackLoo, thank you. But when you spot a systemic failure, you might well ask, is there historical precedent? Is there prior art? Have we faced an issue like this before where we made a protocol 32-bit field sized and we wished we'd made it bigger? Can anybody think of a time in history when we did something like this? Oh, wait, we wish that we had made IPv4 bigger. So let's look at the rollout. Here's one time when we tried to scale up a 32-bit field. The first RFC to standardize it was back in 95. Over 30 years later, countless industry working groups, billions invested, vendor coordination efforts, national mandates, and we're hovering below 50%. Many enterprises still depend on V4 because of deep technical debt. So see, IPv4 address exhaustion was gradual. 2038 is a cliff. There's no market push to fix it, unlike here. If one 32-bit address field has taken us 30 years and we're not done yet, I would submit to you that 32-bit time may not be easier. Meanwhile, standardization has exploded. We've shot from about 2,500 RFCs in 99 up to a projected, say conservatively 12K circa 2038. These define everything in our stack, from networking to data exchange to timing itself. Each new RFC links to potentially dozens of others. If you change a field in one, the ripple effects spread. The spec stack grows denser, and with AI tools drafting text for us, this will only accelerate, I suspect. Now, the fivefold growth means compounding complexity, and complexity breeds fragility. These interlocking standards are like a root ball, binding together the foundations of our stack, but impossible to untangle. And it's not just the IETF. See, there are many other standards bodies. They're just one. They get the spotlight, but there's ISO, ITU, IEEE, GSMA, 3GPP, and countless closed industrial standards we can't even see. Change one field in one spec, and the ripples spread. Normally it takes years to coordinate changes across technical committees and different standards bodies, but we have a problem. We have these rollovers converging on us within a decade with on the order of tens of thousands of standards that we haven't begun reviewing, each a part of our global Rube Goldberg machine, each a potential fault line. So scope is also scale. Back in 99, we had on the order of 50 million, maybe 100 million devices. Today, we've shot past 30 billions. This is on the order of a 5 to 600x jump. The defining variable on 2038 is really the explosion of the installed base. This superlinear growth is perhaps the fastest technological expansion in human history. And unlike Y2K, we don't even have a denominator. We're just scaling blind. So we measure what we can see. A lot of people assume that NTP is fixed, right? Because the 2036 fixes were rolled out in 2010 in V4. So we scanned about 200,000 NTP servers that expose the right kind of metadata so we could see what versions of stuff they're running. 1 in 3, about 62,000 systems today, still running a version that is just going to kick everything back to the Victorian era in 10 years' time. So the line of visibility is sort of refracted at the edge of the firewall, but we can see iceberg on the other side. This confirms the iceberg is real. Some nations treat time like critical infrastructure. Take Sweden, for example. They've rolled out a national terrestrial sort of sovereign timekeeping network that includes multiple redundant atomic Stratum-1 servers. They've developed NTS protocol to replace NTP in their environment, GPS independence, a sustainable public funding model. There's more information available. This is interesting, though. If Sweden can invest and own their clocks, why can't we? So the pivotal question is this. If expanding one 32-bit field in one protocol is taking us decades and billions, what happens when tens of thousands of protocols must be revisited inside of a single decade? We're at T-minus 49 quarters.
So I'm looking at some of your faces, and you might be thinking, well, FUD, right? FUD everywhere. I know I was thinking that the same. Like 1 year ago, I was sitting there. I was watching Trey lightning talk 5 minutes on 2038. That was very hard to do, 5 minutes. But my takeaway was the following. I went home and I was thinking what he said. He said, Y2K was 25 years ago. We only have 13. Now, 13 years might seem like a lot of time, but if it's all this, it's really not. It's not a lot of time. And, I went home, like Klaus saying, I was messing around with some ICS OT devices, and I went and I tested them, and they failed. I encountered some failures. I thought, that's interesting. I tested my smartwatch. It failed. Maybe a coincidence. I tested my TVs. I started running around my house testing the TVs, the smart TVs. Half of them failed. So I tried to figure out what's this guy's phone number, and I called him, and I said, good, we have to start working on this. So we did. So please bear with me and entertain my formula here for FUD. I state that fear is actually uncertainty plus doubt. In this very special case, there's no doubt. We know this is going to happen. It's 2038, so time moves forward, right? So if doubt is zero, what remains is uncertainty. Uncertainty about what will fail, how hard it will fail, where are all those things that fail, right? And if we solve uncertainty, we can gauge fear to understand how this rollover will unfold. So what will fail? Well, everything that depends on Unix time structure, and we're talking about everything in its stack. So it can be just the operating system, an old 32-bit kernel, but it can be a 64-bit device that runs 32-bit user land. We're talking about databases, we're talking about protocols, we're talking about file formats. Imagine everywhere where there can be a 32-bit timestamp, right? So, yeah, I don't think this is a hype. For Epoch rollovers, FUD is just physics. It's simple, it's going to happen, there's no doubt. We just need to understand what fails and how. And I call this the discovery challenge. Essentially, we need to solve this uncertainty so we can gauge fear, right? So what exactly is vulnerable? Like I was saying, 32-bit stuff, roughly, mostly, right? But also sometimes 64-bit stuff. How can we start searching this? So we start to think about approaches and methods so we can, have an idea how widespread is this problem. And I immediately thought, server side, we can scan for stuff, we can fingerprint, try to derive versions. I work at a company that has one of the largest scanning operations in the world. So for me, it was nice to have that data set and try to figure that out. Then I thought, okay, client side also. There are things connected to the internet. They're not scannable, but they're still using the internet so we can get some data like endpoint metrics, like, update servers logs, or, maybe even sinkholes. And, you happen to know who runs one of the largest sinkhole operations in the world? That's right, BitSide. Now, I was looking at also software and firmware. We can look at open source repositories. We can look at SBOMs. There's companies out there extracting SBOMs from firmware directly where the open source code is not available. So, do you know who runs one of the largest, data sets of SBOMs in the world? I don't. But if you know, please come to me because I think you'll be a key part of solving this issue. Anyway, there's a lot of methods. You can go and look for device specifications for hardware. You can look at RFC specs and dumps for, protocols. In the next slides, what I will share is some of our explorations. I can't share them all because there's no time. So let's start with SNMP. If you ever did pen testing, I'm sure you love SNMP, especially back in the days where everything was public. It gives a lot of information about a system. In particular, you can figure out the architecture, which is very interesting for this problem, right? Because if it's a 32-bit system, it's likely, vulnerable to the rollover. And we scan around 15 million IPs, and of those, sadly, only around 400,000 we were able to exactly fingerprint the operating system, the architecture, I say. I say sadly because SNMP version 3 has this thing for enforcing, username and passwords, which is a bummer. Anyway, but of those 400,000 systems, a bit more than half were running 32-bit, okay? They will probably be vulnerable to the 2038 rollover. Where are they? How would they fail? We need to go figure those out. We have to inventory, we have to test, okay? In some particular cases, we can even use SNMP to extract the exact Linux kernel version. And if you have the Linux kernel version and you have the architecture, then you can, with high confidence say that the system will fail because we know when the patches for 2038 were issued. So in the small subset of cases that was possible, around 20,000 systems, 14,000 were vulnerable to 2038 rollover. Okay? So those maps over there are just to show that this impacts everybody. There will be bias depending on technologies or devices or market penetration for some vendor, but we know for a fact that this is widely distributed and it will impact everybody in the world. Another server-side example is NTP. We were looking at NTP, in particular NTPD. Trey said 200,000, or roughly one-third, were still vulnerable to 2036 rollover. But guess what? 120,000 are still running 32-bit systems. So are they fixing 2036 for a couple of days, years later they will fail? We have to go, we have to inventory, we have to test. We have to figure out where those servers are. You see the red thing? Red is bad. There's a lot of red. It's 32-bit. Okay, moving away and talking about, blast from the past, pun intended. So last year I was here trying to blow up gas stations. Those were the devices that I was testing. And I was testing different devices, different code bases, different brands. So forget it's an ATG, just think about an ICSOT device that has a web interface. What happened was, on the rollover, the remote administration fails. You cannot no longer log in or remotely administrate this system. Why? Because you can use a correct username and password, but the actual authentication token expiration date is back in 1900s. So it won't work. You're locked out. In this particular ICSOT devices, they also fail leak detection because it's a process that depends on time to detect if there's a leak over time. So there's operational logging disruption. In the end, this device become unusable. Why are these devices important? Well, they are everywhere where there's a big gas tank. Think about, gas stations. Yes, there's over 1 million of them in the world, but it's not only gas stations. Whenever there is a big backup generator, those devices have to exist. Think about hospitals, think about airports, think about data centers. And moving away from this example, let's talk about client side. I really like the TV example, the smart TV example, for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's a computer that doesn't look like a computer. And if you think about those kinds of systems, they're everywhere, and they support all sectors of our society, right? Also, they are a way to interface with information, and they are everywhere. They are not just on your living rooms, so you can watch the game. There are airports, hospitals, control stations, military facilities, meeting rooms, whatever. TVs are everywhere. They are all smart. Nowadays, even your toaster is smart. So, TVs are not usually scannable, discoverable via the internet. Sometimes they are, I learned that, but they are internet-enabled regardless. So vendors know the models. Vendors know which TVs connect to their update servers. They have the metrics. I'm not a TV vendor. But ad companies also know sometimes the architecture of the smart TVs because they serve ads on your TV. And guess what? Even malware. There's some very famous brands that even come pre-installed with malware. So I went back to our sinkholes and I started, trying to figure out, do we have TVs in our sinkholes? Turns out, in just 1 week, I found over 177,000 TVs. And 6%, give or take, they were vulnerable. I know they were vulnerable for sure because they were my brands of TVs. Think about this. By the end of 2026, Strategy Analytics, they predict there's going to be 1 billion smart TVs in households alone, not counting about business. Okay, I don't want to be on a operation table or surgery and the TV fails. I don't want to, have a TV failing in the middle of a military operation. TVs are actually quite important. As you might have think by now, measuring this at scale is hard. There's a lot of things we can try. We will have to just accept that it will be impossible to map out every single vulnerable system. It's not possible. So we have to focus. We have to choose where they are. And we don't have to give up. We can take some educated guesses. For example, we are thinking about using a methodology, or been using, about the popularity of, architectures over time. The operating system vendors have this, and luckily, Debian shares this popularity contest package that gives you statistics of architectures over time, their usage. So imagine we found like that FTP string over there. It's WFTP, it's compiled in 2003. So how likely this is a 64-bit version? I mean, not very likely. And if it's not very likely, we can at least focus on the systems or, develop heuristics that help us focus on some systems when we can only know the date, for example. But definitely more research is needed. Okay, some practical examples too. Things that you might go home and test, like you might go home and test your nuclear submarine. You might not have a nuclear submarine, but a nuclear submarine is a good example of a system that's made out of other smaller systems. They are all interconnected and talking to each other. And if one of those subsystems fail because of time, how would it cascade over the others? What I'm saying is, it's not enough to just understand if a particular library is vulnerable to the rollover or not. There will be cases where these tests have to be made and conducted in situ. That list has 2 parts. The red part is that, I might have found issues in every single items, like cars included, but that's another talk. Now, think about time. Time is the root of trust. We tend to think about time as something that only goes forward. As we see, sometimes it can jump back. So time is surrounded by these assumptions, but certificates, logging, cryptography, consensus about when things happen. Everything is dependent on time. Think about TLS. TLS will fail. If you're using a browser, you probably saw like a certificate expired pop-up or something like that. The certificate is failing. But if it's your update mechanism on your machine, will you have a pop-up? I don't know. If it's machine-to-machine communication, it will just silently fail. And those silent fails can be very, very costly. But one of the things that I'm here to tell you today is that you don't have to wait 13 years. All these vulnerabilities are exploitable today. NTP is not secure. GPS is not sovereign. It's easy and it's cheap to conduct this kind of attacks. Spoofing GPS costs less than $100. I know, I tested it. It's easy. NTP injection, file format stamps that you can change, protocol timestamps that you can fuzz, all with the objective of manipulating time. So, this 2038 rollover vulnerabilities, they can happen today. And we tested them. Now, before I give it back to you, Trey, if some of you feel this urge or this itch to, go back home, start testing your car, your fridge, your toaster, whatever, I want you to think about 2 things. The first and most important thing is setting the clock is like picking a lock, okay? You don't do it if it's not yours. And you don't do it if you're dependent on it, because it might break. And then keep in mind this, if you're testing stuff randomly. If a device doesn't let you set the date past January 19, 2038, ask yourself why.
Thanks, Pedro. So let's take a quick look back at Y2K. Hit me, baby, one more time. In the 90s, pop and panic both went global. But Y2K didn't sneak up on us. I did a little bit of research. See, there was this guy named Pedro de Jager who warned us all back in 93. And broadly speaking, the world listened. We had a UN coordination center with over 120 countries participating. We had national task forces. In 1999, Russia and the United States, still barely speaking after Kosovo, established a joint early missile warning center just to prevent World War III from breaking out because of a glitch with the Y2K rollover. That's how seriously we took it then. This wasn't just code. It was coordination and investment. See, the dot-com boom did not begin with venture capital. It began with the Y2K remediation. Y2K forced a global audit of our IT systems. This built the safety net that enabled the internet economy to be built. When Y2K passed, we stopped investing and the bubble popped. See, the digital age was built on the back of a successful disaster avoidance campaign. Society saw that technology had made technology safe for society, and we believed the risks were behind us. If we act together now, we're not just preventing disaster, we're laying the foundation for the next quarter, or the next era, and we're at T-minus 49 quarters. How much did we pay for Y2K, actually? On the order of, adjusted for today's dollars, between 1 and 2 trillion US. That's a lot of money. And what did we get for that? Basically nothing happened. That's because the remediation worked. But the successful remediation made the return on investment invisible to most. So now no one sees the business case for 2038. And this will be harder. So is this problem solvable? Well, coordination is failing us right now. But the fixes more or less exist. We have some idea what to do. The hard problem is deploying them across billions of devices in time. See, 36 and 38 converge on us in a single decade with embedded systems, bad economic incentives, and no central coordination. If we face that reality together early, we can still blunt the worst. And so we triage by tempo. I give you the Brittany blackout, which we don't want. See, cascading blackouts are good. Not all failures hit us at the same speed, so we triage by tempo. It's the only sane strategy. First, life safety. If your medical systems, your aviation systems desync, people die. Next, military command and control. A false timestamp in deterrence or live ops can escalate a crisis. Then critical infrastructure, where your power, your water, your transport failures can cascade into black swan events. Lastly, financial markets. We need our economy, but the economy unrolls at a slower pace. Money can wait, lives cannot. So we triage by tempo. Our reality will do it for us. And respect to Brittany. She showed us what resilience looks like. So let's talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room. We've known about 2038 since the 90s. There's Amelia beside the gorilla. That's us. We see it and we pretend we don't. Y2K had prophecy and panic. 2038 just has fatigue and burnout. We're at the apex of an AI tech boom. Smart money expects the bubble to pop, perhaps in the next year. When that bubble starts to deflate, the veterans who built our last era will be entering early retirement. What we're left with is a generation of cloud engineers who've never been taught what an RFC even is. This timing is brutal. We'll need to invest trillions in the long-lived stuff that we can't just reboot. Power grids, sensors, satellites, industrial controls, medical systems. Now convincing our governments, financial markets, and the public to fund a remediation at scale campaign for invisible systems during an economic contraction will be one of the hardest challenges of our era. We converged our entire planetary communications infrastructure onto internet protocols. If there is today still a red line between Beijing, Washington, D.C., and Moscow, it surely runs on internet protocols. When the internet's clocks drift, we don't have a good fallback remediation communication plane. So remediation is not optional here. Think about climate change. This is slower, it's gradual, it's local, more or less, where 2038 hits everyone all at once. January 2038, 3:14:07 UTC, bam, set a reminder. Put it in your calendar if you're able to. Because when that second ticks over, we'll learn whether we did enough. Now, politics may reward fearful silence, but physics does not negotiate. The supply chain gorilla is up on the rooftop. You see, 70 to 90% of our technology depends on Asian production and supply chains. True, but the dependencies run in all directions. Taiwan, China, Europe, the US, we're all interdependent. We have different install bases, the same fundamental vulnerabilities. Pedro's data proves that we all have this problem. It just manifests differently depending on what you're running. Resilience is not just about protocols, it's also about parts. You can't stockpile your way out of this, you can't compete your way out of this, and no one is going to willingly accept monopoly solutions. So trying to take advantage of each other's vulnerabilities is one way to guarantee we all fail. Kong is on everyone's roof. That monkey is not going to climb down by itself. It's up to us to deal with it. Either we all coordinate, or we fall together. Now, it's where it's really a question of life and death. Dumb technology today produces systemic failure tomorrow, and 2038 will not hit the world equally. No, today obsolete gear with vulnerable firmware is being dumped in emerging markets. Hospitals, utilities, and transport in underserved regions will inherit the failures that richer nations refuse to fix in time. This is not just technical debt. This is moral debt. The weakest prepared, those with the least incident response capabilities, will be the hardest hit. Whose children will live with the failures we choose to leave behind? Justice means exporting resilience, not vulnerability. And this inequity doesn't stop at economics. It touches defense. See, there's Macaulay Culkin's Big Gorgeous Head. We might wish we were home alone, but we're not. Our deterrence chains are brittle. A rollover during peak tension could escalate before humans even notice. Nuclear subs can't just reboot for patches, and every recall creates a blind spot. Defense avionics means reading a timestamp could register an attack. Even remediation patching has risk. Think about the attackers that have footholds within critical national infrastructure. They hear about a patch window that feeds use it or lose it logic. This is not science fiction. Just Sunday, the Chinese state accused the US NSA of having penetrated the National Timekeeping Center of China between 2022 and 2024. This is in the news right now. So if these allegations hold truth, I would say these actors are playing with fire. This is a declaration of time itself, time synchronization as a legitimate attack surface. This is dangerous. This could have black swan effects. Maybe we need a treaty to ban this kind of attack. I don't know. But this is an arms race. And under the best of circumstances, we're all running late for 2038. And it is a competition, unless and until we choose to cooperate. So it's hard to think when we're trying not to sink. And so we think before we hit the iceberg. What to do technically? So think Sweden, there's a good guide. They treat time as critical infrastructure. We should too. So test. Your silent failovers from rollovers, they're not just going to walk in and submit a ticket. You have to test. You need test beds. Second, this means you need to know your assets. Third, harden in layers, NTS on-premise clocks and rubidium or cesium backups so the GPS loss isn't fatal can protect you from being exploited today. Fourth, isolate your control planes. Critical national infrastructure. Critical infrastructure shouldn't be syncing over the open internet. Clean your NTP hygiene. Don't just let good systems be poisoned by talking to bad, random Stratum X stuff on the internet. Treat your time with as much care as you treat DNS. Now, briefly, what else can we do? At the policy and procurement level, we've talked about risks, but where is our agency? Our money still talks. So at the national level, this is basically a TLP-read conversation with your vendors. Procurement is your leverage. Demand proof of post-2038 validity. And push for a temporal bill of materials like an SBOM, but for time. Now, at the regional level, this is a TLP-AMBER conversation. Your SCADA, your telecoms, power grids, these cross borders, so you need to audit together with your neighbors and use sunlight as leverage. Again, also a conversation with your vendors. And at the international level, this is a TLP green conversation because in many cases, these types of vulnerabilities that we're going to be addressing together are exploitable, 0 days, weaponizable. So share wisely, don't arm nihilists. No nation fixes this alone. We have to talk to our adversaries, and we also need to start owning our own clocks. That's sovereignty now. So, your toolkit, demand proof, audit, coordinate. Resilience is not a patch for 2037. It's having a backbone in an upcoming meeting you're in Q1. So, I'm just going to leave you with this definition. Obsolescent by design. When we procure systems that are obsolescent by design, every deployment becomes a countdown. Story time. When I did pilot training, they said that we wouldn't do spin training because more people died doing spin training than in spins. But my dad, who was a former U.S. Air Force instructor pilot, said, no son of mine gets a license without doing spins. So, here's the key thing to know about spins. They're just fucking terrifying. When you're in an aircraft that's locked into a spin, the ground is getting really big, really fast, and you're going straight toward it, and everything is spinning, including all your instruments. Your controls aren't responding. And it does produce panic. So, there's another key thing to know about spins. There's this thing called a minimum safety altitude, where if you get into a spin above the minimum safety altitude and you do the right things, you're probably going to recover, go home, have a beer, tell a story, and be fine. Below the minimum safety altitude, as the name suggests, you're probably going to go into the ground, and you better hope your parachute has been serviced lately. So, the recovery procedure, it's completely non-intuitive. I won't read it to you, because I can't even remember it, and I've done it. But the guy who discovered it back in 1912 was the first person who survived a spin, and the people who found out how he did it swore he'd done a deal with the devil. And so you have to do the procedure. It's like 4 or 5 things in sequence, and you have to wait. And the waiting is part of the procedure. It's precise. It's calculable. How many seconds you have to wait after you complete the procedure to find out if you need to jump out or not. This is unnerving. Every primal instinct within you screams out, but the only path to survival is disciplined, sequence, and steady nerves. I once asked my dad, who was also a former airline pilot, how he handled the moral weight of all the lives in the back of the airplane he was flying, and he said to me this. He said, son, it's easy because you're in the front of the plane, and where that plane goes, you get there first. And so you just focus on seeing your own family again. Excuse me. So we're not the pilots of the internet. It's a distributed system. There is no cockpit by design. Who flew here to Luxembourg for Hacklu? I want you to think not about the pilots on your plane, but about the stewards, those whose job it is to get everyone seated and, in case of an emergency, into a dignified brace position. Because, see, we are the stewards of our technology stack. That's why we get paid the big bucks. In terms of 2038, we're still above minimum safety altitude barely. But the airframe is locked into the spin, as we've showed you. We may all do our jobs so well that in 2039, people think this was a big fat nothing burger, just like Y2K. But I tell you, we will feel this. Stewardship means acting decisively with the information that you have been given. When we normalize exploration within our critical infrastructure, we convert time into debt. When that throwaway logic infects the invisible computational substrate that upholds civilization, it stops being a business model and it becomes existential risk. See, 2038 is not just a technical deadline, it's also a moral one. Around Y2K, the co-creator of C and Unix, Dennis Ritchie, was asked at a public meeting about Y2K and its implications for Unix, and he said, Unix has no issue until 2038, and I don't care, because I'll be dead by then. And Dennis was right. He died in 2011. This is no criticism of Dennis. It's a reminder for all of us. Like many of our software design patterns, Dennis too was mortal. Now people keep saying to me, Trey, but you're just too early on this 2038 issue. It's 12 years in the future. And to them I say maybe. But I keep seeing all these kids on trains, and I can't stop thinking how they're going to be teenagers then. So I say to you, remediation is not heroism. It's being an adult in the room. Getting home to your family in this frame means realizing the impact that this problem space will have on you, your life, and those of your loved ones. You may say, I'll be long retired by then. This will be someone else's problem. To which I say, but do you wish to retire a hunter-gatherer? Don't wait to be warned by your national authorities. We have warned you today. ITD, inventory test, demand proof. Write that down. There's your practical audience takeaway. Start now, not later. You see, the forest doesn't think about the chipmunk, but the chipmunk still depends on the forest. And every resilient system begins with a brave human being who refuses to shut up in a meeting.
And remember, guys, setting the clock is like picking a lock. Thank you.
There is no good way for me to say anything right now about breaks and so on. It's deep. It was a great talk. It has impact. The only thing that I want to pass on to you in the context of Hack Lou is many years ago, a Norwegian lady called Marie Moore gave a keynote here. And I'm thinking right now, what happens when her pacemaker ticks into 2038?
I've been texting with Marie about this, because you're not wrong.
Is she going to die on that second?
It depends if her pacemaker is syncing with NTP. It could be earlier. I don't know.
But I would love to see some kind of follow-up on
medical devices.
Pacemaker devices. Yes. Are they all going to die? Because
I have
we grow older.
A buddy who just told me, he was like, I'm going to go do this to my pacemaker right now. I was like, let me know that you're okay. So, you're not wrong.
You might want to share our
Oh, right. Sorry. Oh, whoops. Sorry. Oh, so
medical devices.
We are such self-promoters, we forgot to even... We'll let you take a picture of our email addresses.
Folks, we're so behind schedule. Would you mind taking all your post-talk conversations outside during
Thank you very much.
the break?
Yeah.